All right, it helps when I actually remember to click the fancy button for the audio. So, not just you, my bad. I had everything ready to go except for that. Thanks, Josh. Thanks, Chris, for reminding me about that. The workflow that I'm using involves using Audio Hijack, and I actually need to turn it on before I can actually use it. Anyway, so backtracking on what we missed, I really don't want this chat to be limited to just this iframe. Josh says he still doesn't have anything, but it sounds like Chris can. So hopefully, Josh, it'll just get caught up for you. So anyway, I don't want this iframe here. This experience wasn't at all like what I was looking for. So what I'd like to do is just have a button that launches the chat. So we're going to see if this works. This is another bug that I want to fix. Next, so launch chat. All right, so this pops up into its own tab, and this will allow people to see all of the chat that's coming in, both from YouTube, Twitch, potentially Discord. I'm not really sure about that exactly. And Facebook, once Facebook gets fixed. I'm running into some issues with Restream posting to Facebook. Essentially, since October 1st, none of the streams have been going to Facebook. Yeah, so Chris, exactly, messages like that. So if we happen to have somebody on YouTube streaming this live as well, you'd be able to watch this channel and be able to see those. There is a bot, I believe, that is set up, but again, that's kind of hit or miss, that will cross-post things. So if somebody on YouTube was watching, they would have seen like a little snippet that said, Chris Forrent said, messages like this, just checking. It's kind of weird and kind of hacky, but this is kind of a nice interface to just be able to see what all of the chat is going on if there are different people on different platforms. Plus, I use this myself. I have another window open with this running. And yeah, it's just nice to have this. So ideally, I want to make this look more like a button. And I haven't done any button styling yet. So let's go into the CSS, or let's go here and do some stuff with the CSS using Tailwind. And let's do padding. Actually, I don't remember if they had built-in button styles or not. Pretty sure they didn't. Yeah, so they had examples of these things. Josh, if you could let me know, are you still seeing anything, or do you still got nothing? Or rather, hearing anything? So the idea here was to use these bits here to create the style, and then they were going to actually bring these into their own, bring them into their own styles that could be reused. So let's take a look at this first. I just want to use their styles for now. I don't think I'm going to do any changes. Let's just see what it looks like. All right, and I'm going to do underline. Yeah, I don't want to do underlines. We'll do no underline. So one of the big things that I've been trying to do with the Astrocasts sessions is playing with Tailwind. I think they call it a utility first CSS framework. And the idea is to do as much as you can. It's kind of the opposite of where things have been going for a while. So doing as much as you can just in inline styles or inline classes, rather than focusing on building components within CSS and things like that. So I've been trying to use this. It looks super powerful, looks super quick. And yeah, so that's where this stuff is coming from. So this launch chat button that is here now, I didn't do any CSS at all. I just used the right number of things to give us that style. And there are ways to do like a button class and essentially apply all of these things so that you can reuse it. But just to get started, this is the first button I've needed. So we don't need to do anything else right now. 1 second here. So Chris, just to confirm, you can hear me, right? Let me go ahead and check where we're at. Get diff. So for chat. Awesome. So git add. Swap out iframe for link. All right. And then the other thing I did was just a removing of a console log that we didn't need. Hello, it's Mate. Did I get it right? Just join chat. Let's see here. Let's push, and this way we can actually launch this code so that potentially people can use it right away if they want to. So we'll go ahead and let that go. All right, so the other thing that I wanted to take a look at right away was this error that I have on the homepage. So far it's been going great. Just off to a start. It looks like there might be some technical glitches, but it looks like at least a handful of people are going all right. First thing we did was added a change to the chat page. If we go to the live chat version right now, you'll see that it's in here. It's in an iframe, and I didn't really like how this worked because you can't scroll through it. It just isn't necessarily the best sort of interface. I don't know if you'll still be able to scroll through it on the loaded version either, but at least you'll be able to make the chat window as big as you want it to be. So that's kind of the goal right there. So as soon as that's deployed, we can check it out and see how that goes. But if we go to the home page on my local instance, I get a nice error. And the problem is that the next event doesn't exist because I don't actually have a cron job running locally trying to go get the CSS file, or the iCal file. So if I run bin console get calendar, this will fix this error. But it should be more resilient than that. At least that's kind of the goal, is to make this a little more resilient. I haven't run into a problem yet in production where this is going to be a problem, or where this has been a problem, but I don't really want to ever get to that point. All right, so the new launch chat button is now live. Oh wait, no, that's not live. Here, now it's live. So launch chat, and here we go. So if anybody wants to try it out, you can feel free to pop this up. You can chat in one window and chat in another, and watch the chat in another. Okay, so let's get back here. So the homepage works now, which is great, but it should just always work. So let's go look at what the homepage looked like. So the homepage has a bit of data here. It gets it from it gets the calendar from the cache. It figures out now as being an hour ago, and then does some work to filter out all of the events that it gets. And then it gets the first value, and then we get the start, which is a date time. And then we pass next event up. The problem is that this is a lot of code that's actually duplicated in many places. It's also on the live sessions page. It's the same exact code. And it's also on the calendar controller. Cache itself is wrapped in some sort of container that can actually represent getting this information. So I think what I'll do to make it simple is, let's call it, I don't really want it to be a repository. Let's see here, so let's do directory, let's call it calendar. And let's do call it calendar events, just because. So we'll do calendar events. I'm not going to make it an interface or anything just yet because I don't really think we need to. Let's get the cache. Cache interface. No. So we'll do piece our simple cache. Create a constructor for it so we can get that injected. And then we'll do, we'll just give one public function as public function get next start, next event start. And then we can do everything that we were doing here. So we'll get this information. We're not going to do this. But we are going to have to figure out how to do something in the case of there not being any items available. This cache, and then we'll just return this. All right. So in the case of our let's look at the calendar controller first. Rather than getting a cache interface, we are going to get a calendar events instance. And so we can do we don't need any of this. All right, and then next event equals calendar events, get next event start. I think I did have this here. So we are still going to have to throw this exception if it's empty. So next event. But now I think we can just do if not. All right. So this should solve that problem for us. So the complicated logic of trying to figure out how to handle this should be fine. So I'm going to go to API next calendar event and see if it's still working. So API next calendar event. Okay, so it does appear to be working. Now I want to see what happens if I flush the keys. DB. Okay, so service unavailable, HTTP exception. Okay. Cool. So that's working. So we're actually going to get a service unavailable, which is pretty much what we wanted. So this is the API event. Now we have the countdown. So this would be the little snippet that shows up in OBS to show the countdown to the next episode. Down. All right, so this does service unavailable, which is great, because that is what we expected. This was actually a little hack that I had to do because I have the debug toolbar on. If I didn't do that, it was giving me essentially this page, a bunch of HTML showing what was going on in some cases. So that's why this is here. Let's do copy this. All right, calendar events. So one of my favorite aspects of working with Symfony Flex right now is all of this refactoring that I'm doing, and I haven't had to touch any configuration files. It was one of my biggest struggles with Symfony in the past. was anytime you would have to make these changes, it seemed like there was dozens of configuration files to change. But because we're doing service arguments, these aren't even coming from the DI component. The DI component doesn't even have to know about this, which is just awesome. But even if we were doing these as, say, we created the calendar events class. This isn't wired up. We pass in the cache interface, it gets it, it does stuff with it, it just works, which is pretty awesome. So live sessions, we need to do something here. So next event. This one doesn't actually need to have exception thrown, but we do probably need to make the twig file more forgiving. Calendar events. I'll have to actually import it now. Right? No? Get next events. All right, so this was the live sessions. All right, so it's still having an issue here, but this is because it's doing this in twig. Null on a null variable. So I think this doesn't seem like that should be getting in there. So if next event is defined as not empty. All right. Okay, so that's fixed there. Home page needs the same thing to it. Home. I think this is probably just because this class probably isn't nearly as robust as it needs to be. It might actually be passing back null, in which case it's actually defined. And I think that might actually be the difference here. So twig defined. Okay, so variable is defined in the current context. Yeah, so it is defined because it's actually been sent up, even though it's empty. So the home page now is a little more resilient to this, and everything else is going to be working as well. So these things are good. If I go to the countdown, I actually don't think I want to do this for the countdown. I want to say that for the countdown, we want to do something different. So countdown, let's not throw that, because that wouldn't be very pretty. Let's do PG transparent. Okay, so let's do span and next event is not empty. Well, let's do is empty. Is not, and then an else is going to be weird. So if it is empty, we'll do one thing. Otherwise, we'll show the countdown as we would expect to. All right, so span style, and we'll just say we don't need any of these special values. And we'll say soon. So if this is ever unavailable, we're just going to say soon. So it sort of works. And then if it actually has a value, it's actually going to show the time. So let's go ahead and get things again. get calendar. Now it should have the data. And now it's actually going to start showing what it needs to. And since the episode starts within the last hour, it still says now. Otherwise, it would have tried to do a countdown. Cool. So we sort of cleaned that up. So add calendar events repository. Didn't call it a repository, but it's all good. Chat page, I'm happy with. It has the pop out instead of the inline. So we kind of got the main first two things that we wanted to do here. So let me go ahead and publish this. All right, so make nicer. All right. And let's go ahead and push that. All right, let's see here. So that's going to take a little while to actually deploy. So let's see what else we have on the list for tonight. Wasn't really sure how far I wanted to go with some of this stuff. We could do some refactoring of the Astrocast video web component. I guess I could ask chat if anyone is interested in looking at any one of these things over anything else. Maybe just mention it in chat, because I'm really flexible at this point. So I've got probably another hour and a half to just hack on stuff. Let's see. Let's remove this for now. All right. The other thing I was thinking is sooner rather than later, I kind of want to set up a registration screen. I thought that might be kind of cool to work on. All right. I'm going to work on refactoring this web component unless I hear someone else say they'd love to see something else happen. So the web components, I'm super new to them. And the way that they work is it's a standards-based way to essentially create new HTML tags. So here we have Astrocast video. I'm wrapping the standard Twitch player with it. I'm doing the same thing on individual live sessions. So if I go to live session 5, I'm wrapping the Vimeo player with this as well. So let's go look at video. I think it's templates. I'm not sure why it didn't come up. So let's go to videos. Oh, that's why. So show. So all this does is wrap a normal iframe with my new HTML element. And what happens if I don't do this is that the iframe is very difficult to control. And this was something that I think Josh actually sent me a bit of code that was similar to what I had on the homepage already. But what happens is the iframe itself, the widths and everything are just weird. And if you don't specify a width at all, what happens is it just defaults to this tiny thing. So you really need to take the width and the height into account, figure out what the aspect ratio is, figure out what the width of the containing class is, and recalculate the width and height and set them manually. So that all requires a lot of JavaScript. And that could be done with jQuery, it could be done, in a couple of different ways, probably, maybe even arguably nicer. But what I wanted to do was try this web component concept. And what I can do here, what this is saying is margin width full. No, that's not what that is. Oh, max width. Max width full. So what I could do is max width, let's do 2/3. Can I do max width 2/3? I thought I could. let's do width 2/3. There we go. So whatever I do to this container, size-wise, is what is going to be reflected in the iframe itself. So if we look into the source, what we're going to see is the iframe itself has width of 800 and height of 450, and the aspect ratio is here. So it looks at the width of this element, which is 800, which is 2/3 the width, and then rewrites the iframe's width and height based on that. So I've done some work with like React and Vue and a couple of other things, and this really seemed like a nice way to do similar stuff without having to do too much weirdness. With full. If we look at the video web component, the way that this is structured is that you create a class that extends an HTML element. You could actually extend specific HTML elements, like if you wanted to create something that extends, say, like a text area, you could do that as well. But I just wanted to start out with the HTML element. It does stuff with the shadow root. I don't know very much about shadow root, so I'm hoping I'm doing this right. It seems to work, but I'm not sure I fully understand it. And then we call init. And this is where I kind of thought maybe I could use some work, because I added this init method specifically for the homepage where we're using the Twitch player. And the problem with the Twitch player is that initially it's actually an iframe with 0x0 width specified, which is not at all it's not at all what's going to be appropriate for here. So the problem was that it was getting 0x0 in height, but the iframe that I had created or copied into the shadow root wasn't actually getting updated. It stayed at 0.0. And the really interesting thing was that it only did that as long as the screen was in view. If I tabbed out and tapped back, everything was the right size. So I don't really have any idea how or why that happened like that. But the way that I fixed it was to create this init routine and then actually do this more than once. So we do it here, and then in the homepage itself, I have it call init directly. So, and it does this, let's see here, after the, well, it does it twice. It does it when the Twitch player becomes online. So at this point, the Twitch player actually has its proper width and height. So then it does some stuff to remove the loading screens and things like that. And then it calls init player resizer, which gets the Astrocast video and tells the Astrocast video to initialize itself again, which recreates the shadow DOM and then resizes the video. I think this is more work than needs to be happening. I think it's way more complicated than it needs to be. The thing that I was doing here also was completely removing all of the shadow DOM's elements every time a init is called. And I think I need to keep doing that, because the other weird thing about the Twitch player is that it starts out as a div and it becomes an iframe. So if we look here, let's see, the iframe, shadow root. Yeah, so initially it is a div, an empty div, and then later it gets an iframe, which is great, but I wouldn't have copied that in here initially. So, yeah. So anyway, there's a lot of unknowns here, and this was how I originally fixed it. So what I'd like to do is just take a look at it and see if we can make it a little more simple. I think it makes sense to redraw this, and I think init's probably a bad name for it. So let's do So we've attached the shadow root. What are we actually doing here? We are synchronizing shadow root. So let's do sync shadow root, because that's better reflects in my mind anyway what we're actually doing here. So let's do synchronize shadow root, and then we call resize. And what resize does is gets the shadow root. It looks to see if there's a query selector, or it looks to see if there's an iframe inside the shadow root. So this is actually something that probably I should handle this somehow if there is no iframe. So I wonder if this causes an error in some cases. So maybe if not iframe, return. We can just bail out if there is no iframe. Let's see if that case ever actually happens. It looks like not. So when does not iframe? Yeah, so it looks like it maybe always has it. So here is the first time through, and you can see that the width and height are 0. This is the second time through where the width and height actually are specified. So this is always there, at least in my case. So that's going to be okay. So resize. Setup resize. What this does is calculate based on the width and height of the iframe what the aspect ratio is, and then it actually removes the width and height from the iframe itself. So when does setup resize? So that happens right after we sync shadow root. So this, let's see here. See what these look like, and I'm pretty sure what's going to happen is we're going to see right after each one of these iframes, we're going to see another iframe with null values, and then, well, it already has a data aspect ratio. Let's see what happens here. Let's see. Set up a resize. I guess we never get to that case. And setup resize is only called once. Resize is called several times. Maybe this wasn't as dirty as I was afraid it was. So sync shadow root, and then resize again. maybe I'm not going to worry about this here. All right, so let's see. All right, so I guess I'm not going to worry about this right now because I think that it's probably okay. The only thing that I was thinking that might be nice, I don't want to get into too much trouble with this, is I don't know if we need to manually do this. I was looking at some of the, I was trying to see if there would be a way for me to see when attributes change. Oh, I didn't spell that right. So just for fun, I'd like to see what this would look like. So let's see, mutation observer. Can I use mutation observer? Yeah, okay. So I'm fine with this. Because Opera Mini, I'm not sure if it's going to be a problem. So I don't remember, does it tell you how to use it? No issues. Q child notes, receive bug. Polyfill. Okay, so this is a, all right, so this is a part of webcomponents.js, which I already have. So mutation observer. All right, so let's go ahead and try it. So I guess this, let's see here. So set up resizer. Sync shadow root, mutation observer, tries to get all of them. So we actually want to look at the element that we actually are. So that would be this in this case. So observer equals new mutation type equals attributes. All right. And then we tell the observer to observe. Observer.observe this. And we tell it we want to look at attributes changing. You know what? I think I need to well, let's just see what happens. If anything. All right, so so none of them show up. I wonder if I can turn autoplay off just for now. Twitch player options. I want to see if I can turn autoplay. Okay, that'll make things a little easier for us. So what I'd really like is to get something out. So it doesn't appear to be doing anything here. So we're observing this. Rotation observer. Ah. There. I think that will help a bit. Okay, so let's go. See if that does something in our console. Yep, okay. So it did change. It does show that it changed, which is good. But it doesn't appear to be seeing if this changed. Astrocasts video. Yeah. So it's not actually watching to see if things change inside here. Let's see if it sees. That's the shadow root is the problem. Yeah, it's not seeing those. All right, so I guess I'm probably not going to actually do anything with this because it's not working the way I expected it to. Let's see. Get elements by ID. Child, which mutations to observe. Child list. Let's try subtree. If this works, it would be cool. If it doesn't work, then it's probably not worth it to play with it too much longer. So let's go. Don't want shadow root. We want Twitch player. Div Twitch player. So it knows which thing changed. So let's go into this iframe. width equals 300. Old value, next value, type attributes. I don't know why, oh, was that one of the bugs? Let's see. No. Doesn't trigger childless change, so you find what it's. Okay. But what we can do, so if mutation type attribute width target dot type. Is that what it is? Target dot tag name. Okay, so mutation dot target dot tag name iframe and attributes and what is it? Mutation dot attribute name. So if width has changed, we'll say all right. See if this works. All right, so that caused a recalc. So height changed, nothing happens. Width changes. There we go. I don't know what I did the first time. So let's do this.sync. And let's go back here and let's see if we can get away without having to do anything here. Because ideally what I'd like is for this just to be on its own. And we could get rid of this entirely. sync shadow root, and then resize. All right, so let's see what we got. So we have Twitch player as an iframe, 640 by 390. And all right, so I think we also need to see one went in. So let's see where mutation observer. So we need child list, mutation. To remember to enable these things, apparently. Attributes, childless true, subtree true. All right. So let's see, brief overview, more in-depth ability. Observe, disconnect. Let's make sure I didn't copy and paste this wrong. to see if I can take a snapshot of this. Somehow I doubt it's going to be that easy. Yeah. All right, that's not going to work. It does have an iframe at that point. Huh. So it does have a width and height at that point. Why is it not just working then? Do so it has width and height of null at that point. Oh, good old race conditions. So the problem is that the client width at this point is nothing, which is why when we come back it shows up. So what's going on is player comes online, the iframe gets its values, the proper values, early on. The iframe value at this point is already width and height. They've already calculated it, and they've already tried to resize. The problem is that the bounding client rectangle is still 0, because all of that happens before we remove the hidden class from live video. Wow. Where's live video? So the only other thing that we could do is watch live video. So what we have here now is attach shadow root, mutation observer, and we want to observe this, and then const field execute observe. It's not of type node. No. So this dot get attribute watch. There we go. Now we need this, but we need to do document query selector, because it's not actually always going to be something inside the element. Okay. So resize null. Okay, so we're watching Why? All right, so it's doing that thing again. This get bounding is not a function. Not sure why these work. Maybe they don't. Okay. All right, so what we can do is not worry about any of this nonsense. Not do anything with this. Don't observe this. We're only going to deal with the mutation observer if watch is specified. And see if we can do mutation. What's the mutation look like? Class name. Okay. We have shadow here. We'd actually have to get shadow first. And then we can check to see if the widths aren't the same, essentially. So if frame.width, well, let's do if not iframe turn. Otherwise, if it's not equal to query selector of undefined. Okay, so it's detected the width has changed. Let me go back to live sessions, session 5. All right, so this works still. Wanted to make sure that what I'm doing here isn't breaking that as well. All right, so what I can do now is if it's successfully tested this, return. So if they're the same, we'll return. Otherwise, we want to resize. Resize, when does that happen? Sync shadow root. Don't know if we actually need to do that at this point. So let's just do this resize and see if that works. That and this. Fun times. Sweet. All right, so I'm pretty happy with that. Not sure I exactly had to do all of the things I did here, but I'm pretty happy. So as soon as the element is connected, we try to resize. As soon as the width changes, we try to resize. So we end up with that being called. And then as soon as this becomes hidden again, or rather if it starts hidden, it becomes unhidden later, we end up getting it resized. So I think that altogether that's a lot better than what we had before. So let's see, so let's put this in its own function. Let's do we don't need this. Shadow root, sync shadow root, this start watching. All right, so if not watch, return, so we don't need to do anything, and so we can drop all of this back a level. Okay, so get the mutation observer. Oh, that was not what I meant to do. Make sure that we have access to that in here. So where do we need the shadow root? All right. So if we don't have an iframe, we're not going to do anything. If the iframe width hasn't changed, we're not going to do anything. Otherwise, we're going to resize. Here we get the element we need to watch, and then we start observing it. Suppose we need all of those things. I think that's probably pretty heavy, but I think there's not a whole lot we can do about it. So this is start watching. This causes the web component to do things if the watched element changes. The main thing we're looking for is if the width has changed for the element that we were actually wrapping the player with. Sync shadow root. Again, this might be way too heavy, and it's only being called once, so I think I'm okay with that. That call setup resize, which should be called after syncing the shadow root. Connected callback hooks up the resize function, and resize does what it needs to here. So let's do maybe even do something smart here as well. Yeah. Cool. All right, so what we can do here is, you know, so I don't know if we actually want to show it in that case. We just don't have to do anything at all if it's 0. So, all right, so let's go ahead. See all the changes we made. So we made the actual Astrocast video web component a little more complicated. The only thing that we had to change on the Astrocast video tag is now we have a watch attribute that we can listen to, that we specify the query selector for the things we should watch for this specific Astrocast player. We were able to clean up the JavaScript on here pretty well, removing a couple of things. The only parts of the JavaScript on the homepage that we're doing now is very specific to the homepage. So we're doing some things with adding or removing the hidden classes, and then the underlying video player that's wrapped by the Astrocast videos element handles showing itself. So I think that altogether this is a lot nicer than it had been before. Let's see. Eventually, I'd like to move this stuff out into its own JavaScript file, but I'm not going to do it right now. This might be it for this section. Oh, I do want autoplay on, I believe. Actually, if you're in chat and you have an opinion on this, let me know. I kind of like the idea that autoplay would kick in, and you know, if you're coming to the live video page and you want to watch live video, it should just work. It's my opinion. It should just start playing for you. It's not like you're browsing channels on Twitch or something like that. But I could be wrong. So that's what it's been doing, and I'm just going to leave it like that unless I hear otherwise. All right, let's see. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and make these changes. Add watch Astrocasts video web component. Cool, so I'm going to push that up and see if we can check it on live to make sure that it's working as advertised on live. Cool, so we did some refactoring, decided to do that, which I think was a good idea. And we know that this works. All of these links are actually, oh. Okay, let's see. Did I leave any console? Pretty bad at that. No, I didn't. Good. But at the same time, I don't know how we're going to know if this is working or if it's the new code or not. I guess it would be in the source. Yeah, so here we have the watch. So watch has been added to the source code. So if we do a full reload and it works, then it works. Cool. And I don't have anything on the live sessions on the live site yet, so that's not going to actually do anything. Okay. All right, so let's see what we can do here. Twitch and pusher integration. Don't think I'm ready for that yet, actually. And we're getting pretty close to time for the session, so I think I might actually sign off for the night. We have another 2-hour session for working with the Astrocasts website on Thursday night from 8 until 10. And we're going to be working on that podcast site again tomorrow and on Thursday from 4 to 5. So thanks for joining this evening. I'm going to see if I can spec out some more things for us to work on other evenings. And if you have any questions, I'm probably going to just leave the stream on for a bit. So feel free to jump on chat and say hi. Otherwise, I don't really think that I'm going to do a whole lot more in terms of structured stuff here, because I don't want to jump into either of these tasks just yet. I think it's going to be a little too much for us right now. I might start looking into registration, so we can start registering users. So registration. But again, I'm not going to be able to get too far into any of this in the next, half an hour. So let's take a look at Symfony user registration. User registration form. Awesome. So what we have so far, just so that we're all on the same page, is a simple username, password. That is all handled right now just using simple security stuff. So security.yaml. It's actually using in-memory users for the admin user. What I'm probably going to have to do is create a proper user for the normal roles. And I don't remember how to do any of that. So let's see how quickly we can get into this. So let's see, simple ORM pack, form, security bundle, validator. So I think we already have all of that. The way that this works, or the security system works, is that everything's based on user interface. So if we look at Symfony Security Core user, you have to provide certain functionality. So you need to be able to ask the user what its roles are, get its password, get its salt username, and erase its credentials. If we look at the in-memory user provider, let's see. So this is where we get the in-memory provider. So the users that we're creating here are set up this way. Let's see if we can find the instances. So create user, user interface, load user by username, get user. Trying to figure out, so it returns an actual user, string to lower user. So this is the actual implementation. So let's open up this. I think user. There we go. So this is the way that in-memory users are represented. So we're not going to use this because this wouldn't be appropriate for us. But this is sort of a bare bones implementation of users, and that's what ends up getting used when you're using the in-memory users. So let's go ahead and see. The first thing they talk about is creating an actual user. Let's see, create a form for the entity. Handling the form submission, register, okay. Subterms, checkbox, okay. So just right off, we need to create our user entity. So I think what I'm going to do, I'm going to use maker bundle, and we'll make user. Okay, so what are the properties we need? We have an ID. Actually, I don't know if I'm going to specify ID. I'm going to guess that it's just going to know that for me. Email, field type. String 255. Can it be nullable? No. All right, so we have username, string length, no. Password. Well, actually, we'll do plain password. And this is there a none? I don't think so. So we just have to remember that this doesn't actually go here. So let's just do string for now. So we're just going to have to delete those values. Then we have password, which is actually going to be the password. Maybe a null. And then roles. This is going to be a fun one. No. Okay. Let's go ahead and get to our user that we've created. No, we need our user. All right, so what other things did they recommend from the defaults here? They're doing a bunch of stuff with the validator. Not super familiar with those, but let's go ahead and use them just to see how easy it is to pull this up. So we have an entity, unique entity is going to be one of the things that we're going to put on here. So repository class. So what's going to make the entity unique is an email address, email already taken. I'm actually going to deviate from this right now, and I'm going to say we don't actually have an email because I'm going to want to be able to email people, but I don't want to be kind of stuck with that. So an actual unique entity should be based on the username. Column type integer, strategy auto. I'm just going to leave that like that for now. So I didn't actually specify this ID, but it's there. So that comes in automatically when you use the maker bundle. Username, I'm going to use some different constraints here. Column type string, length unique true. So type string, length, and then unique true, and then assert not blank. skirt not blank. And the validation is for more for the form things. It's kind of weird tying these things together, but I'm not going to rock the boat on this one too much. Plain password. The only things I'm going to do is do these assertions. We aren't actually going to make these columns. Plain password, okay. String length. I'm going to be using bcrypt. Column type array is roles. The constructor, do we have one? No. All right, so let's create one. And the default is just going to be to set the roles to role user. None of the users created this way will have admin rights, at least not right away. Let me use the short array syntax. Get salt is actually going to return null. Which it's not even going to complain about that. User interface. Now it's complaining. So we need to implement get salt and erase credentials. Since we are going to be using bcrypt, we don't actually need to get a salt because these two algorithms don't require it. Erase credentials, I'm not going to do anything with just yet because it's not super meaningful at this point. Handling form submission, entity manager. All right, so we're going to go configure security first because that's the way I want to do it. So we have set up the encoder originally to say anything that is a core user uses bcrypt. We don't have the same thing for our new entity. So what we want to do is set the same values for entity user. So this is how you could actually have plain text, say, for the in-memory users, but use bcrypt for things in the database. In my case, I want to use bcrypt in both situations. And I'm actually going to change the cost just to use the default, whatever Symfony decides for the default. The next thing I want to do is do the migration. So bin console make migration. This is going to create a migration specifically for creating this user. So I'm going to open this up. And so it's going to create a sequence, create a user, password, varchar, not null. Okay. Roles is going to be text, and then create an index on username, and then there's a comment on the column. And here again, I need to drop this create schema thing because that's just ridiculous. So this looks like it's good to go. So now what I can do is actually run the migration. Bin console. And now I should have users. Let's go check it out just to make sure. Astrocast table. Yep, we have a user. And we have user, username, or ID, username, and password. So those things are all there. Let's go back to what they had wanted to do here. So we're going to create a registration controller. Controller registration. And I'm just going to leave it here. Even though I don't really want to. I can go in and change these things later. So where is registration? All right. I think I had to kick it a bit for it to actually show up. Unless it's not actually there. No, it is. Good old Mac OS. All right, so this is the registration controller. And let's do register. All right. So far, so good. Let's do equals container. There we go. All right. Yay, now it looks the way it's supposed to. So the registration controller, let's take a look at what all it needs. So it's using command arguments. So let's go ahead and go to here. And we'll call this register because that makes more sense. We're going to get the request, which is Symfony HP Foundation, and user password encoder interface. So this is the thing that we get based on our security. So we need to know which of these to use based on which type of thing we got. So build the form. So we're going to do new user. And this is extending abstract controller. We already are. Okay. So what this does is creates a new instance of our user. And then we create a form based on the user type. And what this form is, it's really going to be a command class. So I'm going to say, rather than calling it user type, I can't remember the command. I'm going to call it user registration type. So I'm going to make, what is it? Oh, make form. There we go. At least I'm pretty sure that's what it is. Yeah. All right, so make form, user type. And so we're going to do user registration type. The name of the entity, model, or fully qualified class name of the new form will be bound to. Let's see here. User class. Form. I don't remember what the convention is for this, so what's the fully qualified class name? Let's do user registration DTO. Let's do form All right, so I guess I have to actually create this first. Which I guess makes sense. So let's do I'm going to command and this is going to look extremely similar to our user. The only big difference is going to be that it doesn't actually have to implement all of this junk. So let's do copy most of it, user registration. We don't need any of the ORM stuff, so we don't need an ID. We do need a username. We do need a plain text password. We don't need a real password, I don't think. We can maybe go back into that later. We don't need a constructor. We don't need this stuff. Don't need get email. We don't need that here either. All right, so we don't need get or set email. Get username, set username. Here we go. What are the other bits that we had in the form here? Yeah, just username and plain password. Okay. And then we need to get the asserts. And I think this means that we can actually remove these from, you remove the assertions from the entities as well. So let's do, get rid of assert, because we don't actually want, I don't think we actually use these assertions anywhere. If we do, then we can add them again later. All right, so we should now be able to do this again, because that class exists. No, it does not exist. App form, oh. Okay, it doesn't exist. Pretty sure I just created it. Class user registration, app form, command object. Let's try it again. There we go. All right, so now we can go into the user registration type and start playing with it. So we're going to add all of the same things that we had from the demo here. And so, except for email. So we have a text type. So this is form. And then we have a plain password repeated type. I don't actually want to repeat these, because I don't much care about that. So I'm just going to go with this, just a password type. And I don't think I need anything else then. All right, so this should be enough to bring in the username and plain password from our user and user registration command object. So all this is an object that contains the information for the form itself. And where that's going to be used is here. So we're creating a form for not user type, we're creating it for the actually, we're not even doing this here yet. So we're going to do user registration. There we go. Then we're going to create a form using the user registration type and passing in the user registration. All right, so we build the form and then we handle the submit. So form handle request. And then we can do things with the form. So we can say, is it submitted and is it valid? We'll do some stuff and let's see what the rest looks like. Otherwise, we need to pass in the form with the create view to the twig template. So all the way out here, we're back to this. All right. If everything is successful, we'll redirect. I'm kind of going about these things in weird orders, but we're going to redirect to home. We could easily do like a welcome page or something along those lines. If everything is good, we need to use the password encoder to encode the password for our user. And this is where things get a little weird because right now what we have is a user registration. So we need to get the user registrations plain text password, but we need to put it on an actual user. Otherwise, the password encoder isn't going to know which encoder type to use. So we're going to do user equals new user. All right. So this is where the translation happens. This is where we convert from the user registration fields to an actual user. We're going to have the user set password. And we're going to set that to the actual password. And I think that means, well, let's see what happens. And then we can get the entity manager. Let's see. Then we persist the user. This is the first time it exists. And then we flush. All right, so once all that's done, we should actually have a user in the database, and then we'll just redirect to home. So if all works well, this should just work. I think this might actually mean that we can update our entity user and ditch plain password entirely, because we aren't going to be dealing with plain password. So plain password. So we're only going to be dealing with the command objects. So I think that should be fine. So registration controller. Now we need to go back to our registration page. And so the next bit is going to use some stuff from some built-in form stuff from Twig. We're going to ask for the username. We're going to ask for the plain password. Let's see what happens. Awesome. So let's see if I do register, please. So it's actually going to do some validation based on, it's going to do some basic validation just using HTML5 or HTML tags. So here we're saying required is required. It's doing that based on the assertions that we had set up. I don't want, let's go to the form type. Yeah, use the registration type. I think label password. There we go. So let's see, I'll go to hello and register. Please fill out this field, test. User. Yes, which exception is it? I wonder if I can't use user. Yeah, I'm guessing that's probably it, actually. Quote user because it's reserved word. Here we go. Explicitly using ticks in the definition, so entity, repository class read only. Quote. This does mention column. Is there a table? Rid of this migration, create a new migration. seem to match what I thought we needed to do. I thought we needed to do a diff. Guess I'm not that far off. All right, let's go into the migrations. Ah. Delete this. So the diff actually looks to see if the information is different. So drop table user, create schema public. You can actually migrate all the way down. Yeah, all right. I'm going to get rid of all of this for now. Actually, I think something happened with the migration stuff here. I don't think it actually created the, well, I think it created something to begin with after it's being accessed by other users. Ugh, all right. Okay. So what I think happened is it created a sequence, and just deleting the table didn't drop it. So creating a new migration didn't really do much for me. So let's do migrations migrate. Great. And now let's create the diff. Come on, Mac. All right, yeah, so here it's creating a sequence. I guess it probably would have been, no, it wouldn't have been fine. It would have worked in my environment because this would have been there, but it would not have actually done anything. How are these two tied together? Create sequence. I'm just gonna have to assume it's okay. Create schema. All right, let's migrate. All right, double check users exist again. Cool. Now let's go see if we can actually insert. Not null violation. Ah, indeed. So now that it's actually looking like it works, we do have to set other things in here as well. So we'll do new user, user set username, $user registration, get username. There we go. Awesome. So we have a user with role user and an actual password. So username is hello. All right, so let's see what happens if I try to log in as that user. Hello, with the wrong password, valid credentials, and right password. It didn't work. Let's see here. I'm still anonymous, so let's see what else we have to do. Maybe I've missed some bits. Wouldn't be surprised. Terms accepted. Yeah, I think we have to tell it where to get those users. So we need to have a provider. Let's see. Here we go, entity provider. All right, so provider. Encoder, okay, so create your first user. I don't need to do that. It's TP provider. So providers, let's do this as specify entity. See here. And so we're specifying where we get the username from. So manager name, customer. We're only using one manager, so I think we should be fine. Firewalls. Main. Farm login. Oof. So for the main firewall, chain user provider. All right. So this essentially merges. This merges the two providers. So we're using in-memory, and then I guess I'll just call it userdb because it matches the example here. And then I need to make sure to tell the main firewall to use the provider. Of chain provider. And this will let me log in as either the admin provider or the in-memory provider. The other way that we could do this is to differentiate between users and admins and specify that the admin firewall is specific for the admin page. Don't really know if that's better or not. But let's see if this at least works now. So hello, correct password. Awesome. So if we look now, we can see that we are logged in as the hello user. Logged in as hello, token class, username, password, token, firewall, main. So the registration worked. We aren't doing anything with emails just yet, but it did allow people to start logging in. So I think I'm going to stop for now. I'm not actually going to push this up. And I think on the next session that we're working on the Astrocast site, we'll finish up the user registration side. And then we can push that. So that will be Thursday at 8 p.m. So from 8 to 10 U.S. Central Time. Thank you all very much for joining this evening, and have a great day.